Well, hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. Mary, James, Aaron here, switching up. Trio's back, though, and that's what's most important. If you're listening for the first time, again, Purposeful Marketing Podcast, what we're trying to do is have dialogue about the things that impact us every single day. The three of us, we talk about it all the time, and we want to never assume that what we're talking about isn't interesting, because it is interesting, and we're going to keep having interesting conversations, like the one we want to have today. So this one is going to be really focused on Mary, and we really want to discuss in this conversation, as this is something I've wanted from other marketers too, is tell me how you got where you are now. Give me the realness of it all. As I just joked before I hit record, podcast bro speak, like, I want the authentic talk. That's what we want from this conversation. It's just like, talk us through it. Specifically, if you don't have a strong marketing network, maybe you don't really get these ideas, thoughts, understanding of like actually how to like claim your career or take your career journey where it needs to go. So we're going to really use Mary as a conduit to have that conversation. So first off, Mary, if you just want to kind of just talk to us, like what's going on with you right now? Like you totally switched careers, different job title and all that and stuff in different industries. So give it to us.
Yep. So about 3 weeks ago now, I switched jobs from being a senior strategist at Gorilla 76, a marketing agency that specifically serves mid-market industrial and manufacturing companies, or companies in like the industrial space, so industry 4.0 kind of things. And now I am head of marketing at a B2B SaaS company that sells a kind of very niche specific CRM for outside and field sales teams. So kind of big difference, but the folks I'm talking to are really similar. So still a lot of people in sales and marketing in industrial and manufacturing companies, though it also spans some others that are relevant for outside reps like medical and stuff like that.
Excellent breakdown. I think one other thing for the listeners who are maybe new is I think it'd be important to maybe explain of like, where were you like 2 to 3 years ago? And like, how did you get here now? And we can kind of take it there.
Yeah, I'll do you one better. I'll tell you where I was like 6 or 7 years ago and then how I got where I was. So like 6 or 7 years ago, I got my first like what I would call real job out of college. So before that, I was working at a running shoe store, which I absolutely loved. I worked there for 3 years. I had a fantastic time. The culture was amazing. The people were amazing. It's where I met my husband, actually. And at the same time, I was also like freelancing for this editor I knew who did college textbooks. So you did like your basic like grammar review, but you also created all the test questions and stuff like that. So I was still kind of in the writing space, and finally was like, okay, I think I better grow up and get a big girl job, and interviewed with one of my husband's friends who was looking for a technical writer for his department in a much larger organization. So got that job, was also freelance to start, and I was writing a lot of course material. So really similar to the college textbook experience. It was all for internal though. So it was writing to engineers, so people who had mechanical engineering degrees, civil engineering degrees, you name it, but they didn't know anything about our product, which at the time was spraying systems and spray nozzles. So I wrote all the coursework to get them up to speed on our product lines. So that's where I started, and that's where I was for like probably 2 or 3 years. And then my leader was like, okay, your talents should probably be used elsewhere. Can you help me out with some like business development stuff? Like I really want to get our research and development team more organized, and like our services could be marketed better. So he just kind of tasked me at that. There was no like real growth strategies in place or any like no goals or KPIs. It was just do what you do, and started like just fell in love with marketing. It was super fun. We did a lot of webinars. I did a little bit of customer research, but mostly like content creation. So a lot of like what I talk about, I hate a lot, which is brochures and case studies. I like case studies actually, but a lot of brochures and like product material, a lot of print material. But the most fun I had was when I got to create like our website, and I got to create all the content for that. And like that's when I really fell in love with measuring. So I got to like measure stuff and be in our CRM and analyze data, and it was awesome. And corporate marketing for that larger organization kind of got wind of what I was doing, and they were like, okay, we want you to come work for us. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So went over to the corporate marketing side and was doing a lot of similar things, but for the larger organization. And that's also when I started posting on LinkedIn, is when I moved to the corporate side. And the interesting thing, if we're talking, like, I know we've talked imposter syndrome on this podcast before. I totally had that before I was on the corporate marketing side. Like, for some reason, I thought I couldn't ever post on LinkedIn if I wasn't like in corporate marketing, because like I wasn't a real marketer or something. So anyways, when I got into corporate marketing, I was really excited because then I could like post on LinkedIn for real. And that's also the time when I came across Matt Shanella and MJ Peters and was starting to follow a lot of thought leaders in the LinkedIn space. And Matt Shanella worked for Gorilla 76 at the time and recruited me. And the rest is history.
Okay, that was great. One thing I'm going to pull some themes out as we talk and just kind of make them very obvious is, I think as you're working through your career, one of the things you did is do stuff. And I think a lot of the time when we think about how to move up the ladder, or how do I get this certain level or certain position, I'm not really sure a lot of people think of it this way anyway, but the common denominator is doing things and trying new things and then failing at those and doing more things. So I'll kind of take the next step here, because obviously I think this is where I enter in the picture a little bit, is, the reason why we recruited you at Gorilla 76 is because of your personal branding. We knew you were talking marketing. We could see it. Now then, when we invited you on the interview, it's, you can clearly see your expertise. I can hear you say it, but I've also seen you build it over time. I think that's a theme on this show we've been talking about is you need to build in public. You need to practice these things. That's how people are going to find you and create that visibility for yourself. Before I kind of go to the next thing, like James, any just questions or follow-ups?
No, I guess this story gets to Gorilla, and the rest is history. I guess like thinking about our audience as folks that are probably, primarily marketing practitioners, either at agencies or in-house, but maybe like have career, have mapped out like, here's what I want my career path to look like. I almost think that like the more interesting bit is like what the journey looks like from like really effective, well-respected individual contributor to who's, who knows, but seems to be very like happy with that role. Like what is the next, like how does the next step look from the perspective of the person actually taking it? You can like imagine, like I want to be a head of marketing. And like for a lot of people, maybe the first time they imagine that, in their head, it's a lot different probably than how it felt in your head when you were going through taking the actual steps to get there. So I guess like, I'm curious, like what it's actually like to, one, make that decision. But two, like physically, what do you do to make what is, I would say like a bigger career jump than the jump from like in-house to agency at the practitioner level?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's interesting you brought that up too, because I was very happy being an individual contributor. I have 3 young kids. I'm like work-life balance. I want to make sure that's well maintained throughout my life. Aaron and I have talked about this a lot. It's definitely for us, and I'm sure for James too, about the journey, not the destination. So we want to make sure we're enjoying every moment of the journey along the way. So I was very happy being an individual contributor, and I made that known to my new current company when they were kind of semi-recruiting me. I was like, hey, look, I'm happy. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm happy with my work-life balance. I am happy being an individual contributor. And I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I don't think one of them is necessarily managing people. So I knew that's definitely not a role I wanted to be in, which is why the interesting thing about my move to like a head of a department is I'm really a department of one right now. So I'm not managing any person, and my role as a leader is more like a leader in like the company space. So I'm not necessarily managing people as much as aligning teams to like a greater narrative. And we've talked about strategic narratives before. So I'm still kind of in the individual contributor role. Just I think my responsibilities look a little bit different.
That's awesome. I think there's something powerful about wanting to be an individual contributor. And I think we all have to debate with ourselves of when do I have to stop being an individual contributor and be something else? And I think that's why I like to hear you discuss it. And for others, as they're thinking too, the thing I want to linger on, and you probably knew I want to linger on this, is like that word happiness. And like, how do we work with this within our career? And I think the three of us, we are high performers, right? I think even if we tried not to be high performers, we probably still would be. But we may all struggle with that idea about happiness and work-life balance, which is something that's different. It's not maybe mutually exclusive. I think with happiness, what I want to know more about is, because you and I talked, is if you're happy where you're at, will you be happy somewhere else? Like that is the grass is always greener question. Did you think about that? Like what were the thoughts going on in your head as you were making those decisions?
Yeah, for sure. So the happiness factor for me, I'm glad you like asked me about like, what does that mean to be happy? So happiness for me, because I am like a high performing individual contributor is how I would describe myself. I also like that.
Wait, before you say that, I'm going to say, I have a feeling that you're going to rule me out of being a high performing individual contributor.
Why? I think you
with your definition of happiness here. I just want to flag that.
Oh, okay. Okay. We'll see. I'll define my happiness and then you tell me if you are or not. So my definition of happiness is like work I enjoy. So like I wake up in the morning and I'm excited to go to work and do the thing that I am getting paid to do. And then two, I enjoy a challenge. So I want to be challenged. I want to feel like I'm growing in my skill set and in my career. So, I think I had this conversation with Matt Chanella once when we were doing like a one-on-one, and he said like, what are your goals? Like, is it VP of marketing? Do you want to work at a big company? Do you want to be in SaaS? Do you want to do this? And I was like, honestly, I just want to be a really effing good marketer. Like that's really my only goal. And what that means, like just staying on top of trends, making sure I'm always learning and growing. So the learning, growing challenge part of it was a huge part of my decision to make the jump from senior strategist to head of marketing at a small startup.
James, rebuttal, thoughts?
No, I abstain from comments about whether or not I am, in fact, a high-performing individual contributor.
All I'm going to say is, I know, James, I haven't worked that long together when we were at Gorilla, but you brought notes. You were well-read. You were really organized. Those are traits of a high performer. So welcome to the club. Okay, so with the happiness conversation too, and I think that's a great definition for you. And that's maybe what I would offer for others too, is like, you and I even talked about that on the phone, right, Mary? It's like, write down the things that make you happy. Does my space and place right now have those things? If so, maybe I should stay. If they don't, if I'm missing some things from that list, maybe I should go. Figure what that formula out is for you to help you make those decisions. Another question with happiness is, again, did you have a conversation with your family? I think as marketers, they evolve, and they also involve in their family. I think these choices become more complicated. So just didn't know if there was any conversation about that, or what are you thinking?
Yes, for sure. So, I'll tell you from the beginning, because I involved Mike, who's really like my main decision, like family person to bounce ideas off of. So I remember when Matt Sniff, who is my founder and chief product officer at Matt My Customers, he reached out to me. And I remember that was just like one of those weeks where like a lot of people were reaching out, and a lot of people asked me to talk to me on LinkedIn, and I entertain almost all of them unless it's very clearly a terrible sales pitch. But if it's like people who just want their ideas heard especially if it's an in-house marketer at a manufacturing or industrial company, I will 100% take that call. But I remember like Matt was like probably the fourth person to like DM me in like 2 days. And I sat in on 2 of them and they were really crappy. Like they were just like people who like basically wanted free work. And I was like, all right, see you later. Like, so when Matt DM'd me, I went to Mike, my husband, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot sit in on another one of these like 30-minute calls where someone's just going to like waste my time. Like I have work I need to do. Like there's better uses of my time than this. And he was like, okay, well, it's probably just a bad week. Like you should sit in on it anyways. And Matt Sniff and I ended up having a really great conversation that did not revolve around his desire to recruit me in any way. He was truly looking for, hey, look, like we're stuck in this like hole right now and I don't know how to get out of it. But I know marketing is probably the answer. Like, what are your thoughts? So we just kind of had like a really cool, like 30-minute brainstorming session. And that's kind of how it started. And then from there, once he wanted me to talk to like their head of sales and CEO and customer success, and then it was getting clearer and clearer that they were probably going to ask me to work for them. I was talking to Mike throughout this whole thing. And so, yes, my family was a huge part of my decision-making process.
Oh my gosh, you said Mike is the guy's name?
No, Matt. Okay. Matt is my and Mike is my husband.
Okay. Because I was gonna say that God, they're both named Mike. Okay. So would it have happened if Matt reached out to you about a job? Like if Matt DM'd you and said, "Hey, we're hiring a head of marketing."
Oh, I probably would have said no because I used to get stuff like that all the time.
Right. That's kind of what I figured. That's just like a fun note. Maybe you know is worth sharing with any folks that might do recruiting for like suite level and like high performers. Like if you're headhunting, you know, just a note the things that worked 20 years ago aren't the things that work anymore. I think I would probably react like this. It would probably be similar for me. I'm not sure, but yeah, just a curiosity I had.
No, I think that's a really good flag to put in the ground, especially like you said, if you're looking for someone who's like a leadership level position.
Yeah, that was the same tidbit I wanted to pull out because I think it's very interesting as, again, if you're an individual practitioner, at some point, if you're doing the things we say, or you're trying new things, you should meet with other people who share those ideas or philosophies. And maybe that's the driver for you to take that next step. I would argue that compensation cannot be the number one reason why. But I think as Mary shared her experience, I'm sure that was part of it. But that experience of actually someone talking to her about this major problem and Mary's mind's working. And she's like, oh, like now I want to solve that. Like, I think that's just so magical. And I do want to flag that as well. Okay, so yeah, just other general questions here. One I did want to ask is, since I know you are goal-oriented, did you have kind of a plan? Like in 3 years, I want to be head of marketing, or maybe in 2 years, I want to take my LinkedIn organic to this level. Talk me through that.
Yeah, I didn't have any career level goals. My goals were the latter. So I definitely was noticing more traction and more business for Gorilla related to my organic LinkedIn. So my strategy over the next at least year was definitely going to be to see what I could do there to like push it forward.
Okay, that's great. That was my inference. So yeah, I think something that I think people need to understand is like, I think it's good to be goal oriented. I'm probably too anti-goal. But I think what's better is understanding like, these are the things I want to do every day. And like, can I do that here? And I think that's what something has worked for me as I made some choices that didn't align with that. I came back to that thinking. Right. And I think for you, again, you're a high performer, but you're not saying that in 3 years, I'm going to be at this level. At 5 years, I'm going to be at this level. You're more looking at, again, the output, going back to the everyday practitioner. You're like, how can I do this thing I like doing every day better? Right. Yeah, I'm going to do organic posting. I'm going to try to figure it out. I think through that process, right? Like that's maybe the aha, like, okay, now people are going to come to you because you are the everyday practitioner. Just interesting stuff. Just
Yeah.
James, any other questions, thoughts?
Oh, I had one. I guess, how do you, if you could maybe like talk a little bit about your process of, because, my understanding is that this is a situation where like you weren't like seeking, you weren't actively looking for a job. Like say you might have been, when you ended up going to Gorilla, or maybe when you ended up working as a technical writer. This is a situation where someone reaches out to you, and it's something that apparently happened quite frequently. If you're in a situation where you're like, I like where I'm at, I'm doing fine, I have the happiness thing that you're supposed to want and seek. I'm so comfortable with that. I just moved. I was able to move my family, and like everything's going really well. How do you evaluate whether like this opportunity is the one that is not like the trap? Because like, everyone knows, like maybe everyone doesn't feel this way, but you can quote me that like 90% of employers will do everything they can to ruin your life as an employee if it makes them more money. 90% of employers are the worst. They're part of the problem. They're part of the reason people aren't happy. So like, how do you like go about, taking like a big step? Like, how do you evaluate to make sure like, okay, this is the right decision? Like what gives you confidence? Like what signals are you looking for?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think I'll tell you about my process, and maybe we can like extract some themes from those. So, number one was meeting with Matt Sniff. I really enjoyed the way that he thought about marketing. He does as the product person, so he's in charge of all product updates or upgrades or anything that they're doing on the software side. And he mentioned they do a lot of user research. Customer research is a part of their regular process. And I love customer research. I think it's essential to business success. So that was a big one for me. Like kind of his thought processes matched mine. The fact that he knew marketing was their missing piece was huge. So I'm going to talk, if anybody happens to go to my talk at Full Funnel on Thursday, I'm going to be talking about this, where like leadership buy-in, a lot of people talk about it, or like working for a CEO who gets marketing. I think that's correct, but I think it can be defined a couple different ways. Like a leadership buy-in could also just be, I don't know what I don't know, but I know we need marketing. So you just do your thing. So I think that is part of like leadership buy-in, or a CEO who gets marketing. So that was a big one. And then meeting the CEO and understanding what their business goals were. So the danger of working for a startup could be they have super aggressive growth goals. And this company, interestingly, does not have super aggressive growth goals, because they know they're missing a key component. They're missing the strategic narrative, the reason why they're doing it, the storytelling aspect. They've tried the tactical execution side and it didn't work. So they were okay with taking a plateau for the entire 2023. So that was a huge one for me. It was like, okay, they're not looking for me like growth at all costs. They're not going to be like on my back about where leads, pipeline, and revenue are. And then from there, just hearing more about the people who work there. So there are a few people who have families there, and they're very family oriented. They have unlimited PTO. So that was all like part of it was, work-life balance. Do they think about marketing the same way I do? And how am I going to be measured?
Awesome. I was kind of writing down the things that seem to stick out for me. You mentioned that, I guess, you have a lot of strong convictions, obviously, about what works and what makes, what is a way of operating as a business that is closer to foolproof. So like, like when you talk about like, oh, they care about their customers and they actively seek to understand them and they build their business based off that. That's like a two birds, one stone in terms of like thought process alignment, but also like business stability. I'm guessing that like part of that was like, okay, if they're doing the right things here, like this isn't a situation where I end up joining a sinking ship,
Yeah.
like they clearly have their priorities, in the right places. So I'm not worried about like the thing you see on, if you're doom scrolling LinkedIn, is everyone just gets laid off. Like people are getting laid off more than they're getting hired. It seems. So I think that like, would you agree that like, that's kind of the way that you approach like understanding if there's like a stable business there is like, well, I feel really confident in what makes a stable business from my perspective, and they just have to match that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that point up too, because the product was a huge part of why I joined too. So like I understood the product. Like I was like, oh, I get it. Like I understand that there is a gap, like a hole that needs to be filled with this product. I can see it, because there were other times when I would get recruited and it was like one of those weird, like recruiting companies where they sell recruiting services, but it's really just like cheap labor overseas that they like rehire or they manage. And it's like, you have to believe in the business. You know what I mean? You have to believe that the product is filling a need that's a good thing.
Yeah. Like if the world was a better, like you don't want to take a job where the world would be a better place if you got laid off.
Yes, exactly. So basically I don't want to work for Meta.
Yeah. You don't want to get in like the corporate health insurance game. Like
No.
what?
Totally. I mean, ethics should definitely be part of your decision, of course. Something else that's important that I really want to touch on is you talked about your career journey. You've talked us through that switch and you made the choice. Are there any just like surprises? Like where you're like, I thought it was going to be this way. Now it's this way. Just going to throw that one at you. I know we didn't talk about it.
No, not too much actually. Surprises like product side are like, I'm surprised at how user-friendly the product is. Like sometimes SaaS solutions like have a long way to go. Like the product roadmap is long and you have to wait for certain steps before you can reach certain market segments. But I was surprised at how robust the product is. It really is. Like it does feel like kind of one of those like magical things where they really were just missing marketing.
Were there any surprises about like, I guess, and this is just me again, like trying to color in every last piece of the timeline, but like, I guess I'm right there with you up to the point that it was finally like, oh, I think they're going to offer me a job. Like, were there any surprises about like the process of actually going from, okay, there's some mutual interest, there's some clear mutual interest, to I'm hired as the, I've signed a contract or I've signed an offer sheet, like, is that a really similar process to, past experiences you've had, or is it just way different when, the position is now like quite a bit higher up the org chart, and so on?
Yeah, I think I was like, so I had 2 meetings with Matt before I started meeting other people on the team. And by the second meeting with Matt, I was kind of like, okay, I think I know what's going on here. And everyone was great and they answered all my questions. I think just from like the taking the leap from like an IC or like, almost like a mid-level up to like a head of, is like the contract process gets a lot more detailed, especially I think with a startup. So startups, you're, invested in equity and you have like different financial decisions to make. So that part surprised me a little bit. And I'm really, really glad that my husband is in finance so that he could answer all those questions. If you need help with that, please DM me on LinkedIn.
That's great. Okay. One other question I have kind of on similar thoughts that we just discussed here is you mentioned already that you are happy. Can you kind of talk about like what it feels like to leave a place where you're happy at to go to another place you're happy at? Because I think a thought in my head is maybe the best time to leave somewhere is when you are happy.
Oh, that's interesting, Aaron. I like that. It was like almost like too easy. Like I think I told Aaron this before. Like I kind of wanted Joe and John, they're the founders at Girl 76, for those who don't know. I wanted them to be kind of mad at me, and they weren't. They were so nice, and they couldn't have been nicer. And they were like, beyond like supportive. It was like, if you ever need anything at all, ever, just please reach out. And then, because of the process, I also gave them like a very long leeway. So I think I gave them 5 weeks, which helped. They could get recruiting going. I had plenty of time to like offboard a lot of my responsibilities. And then, like I still talk with everyone today. I talk with James on the podcast. I, text a lot of the people I work with like on a weekly basis still. So yeah, that part has been awesome because I left a place before where it was not like a leaving somewhere happy to happy. And it's like, you're basically just like cut off. No one talks to you anymore, it's interesting.
Okay, that's great. I think that's something to think about as a marketer is it's not that you want to leave somewhere, but it's you want to provide as much value as you can. And then that's a great time to leave. It's because then you can provide more value somewhere else. And I think that's going to help you build relationships along the way. Here's kind of my last technical question. And then James, do you have anything else you can follow up? But 30, 60, 90. You made the decision. Now you're there. What are your thoughts of like, how am I going to have like the most productive, high impact 90 days when I start?
Yeah. So, Aaron, I think you phrased it like beforehand, like, were you given it or did you define it? So I got ahead of it and I defined it because I didn't want someone else defining my 30, 60, 90 for me. So that helped a lot. And I was very clear that a lot of my 30 and 60 was going to be foundational work. So a lot of customer research, a lot of like, just that kind of like, I've posted about it on LinkedIn if you want to look at it, like website maintenance, making sure the conversion path works. What does our HubSpot like or CRM look like? So auditing that and cleaning up anything that's like old or the data's crappy or anything like that. So a lot of like my work now and for the next like 3 to 6 weeks is going to be foundation building. And then I'll get started on like content promotion. We have a lot of content right now. We have a podcast, which is super helpful. So then it'll be like distributing content we have while also creating net new content, and then measuring it. So I was really clear with the CEO that I didn't expect to see pipeline in my first 90 days. I mean, if it happens, good, but I don't expect it. And I even told him that from the moment we start distributing content more strategically, I wouldn't expect it for like 4 to 6 months. So I set those expectations really early, like before I got hired early. And so just so I knew that they were bought in. And I think that's important.
Yeah, it's actually, I like the idea that you define them so you can set expectations, set boundaries, set guardrails, what's expected from you. So you are set up for success. I think just on this thought, something we do at Proofpoint, which I think is good because our 30, 60, 90 is mapped out, but we have quick wins that we get to define and decide in those 30, 60, 90 days. So I think that's a different take on it. Wow, we've asked you a lot, Mary. James, do you have any final questions or thoughts?
I don't really think so necessarily. I think that we should definitely like come back. I have like things that I'm excited to ask about like at 60 or 90 days in terms of like what is it actually like to do this? Because there's a lot that that changes. Like the executional hurdles change when you're not like when you're an agency working for a client. There's a bunch of executional hurdles that like you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, if I was just in-house, I could freaking navigate this so easily. And then, you imagine though a situation where you are in-house, and especially if you're a team of one, and it's like, okay, well, the executional hurdles are just totally different. So I'm kind of curious, like, I'm excited to talk about it, more over time. But I am excited. I'm always glad to hear you talk about how excited you are about it, because you did earn it, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I want to be clear too, though. So I'm only in day 13 or something. I've already suffered from crippling imposter syndrome several times. Mostly because I am doing so much foundational work, and that foundational work is a lot of research, writing down ideas, creating strategies and that stuff. So coming from agency side, which is to James's point, heavy execution, you have those hurdles, but it's execution oriented. Right now, to not be working on a front facing deliverable is very nerve wracking and anxiety inducing for me. So it's taken a lot of it's okay. You can do this foundation building to start. So
your time to getting to a win, what you previously would have called a win, where you're oh my gosh, I've got some momentum, or I have some wind under my sails, or some confirmation that I'm good at this.
Yes,
it's really easy to get that feedback when you're delivering a product.
Exactly.
It's really hard to get that feedback when you're talking to customers.
Yes, 100%.
Love it. Let's do a 30, 60, 90 check-in on the podcast, and we can kind of talk through those. So, Mary, appreciate you. Also proud of you. I love this. Let's offer graciousness here. This is great. We're all moving up in the world. For the listeners, give us some feedback. Raise your hand if you want to jump on the pod. I love to have conversations like these. Talk me through your day-to-day as a marketer. I think there's a lot of insight within that. This episode will be available on Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. I will also mention, yes, Mary's presenting at Full Funnel. We're recording this in the past, so in the future, I'll put that recording maybe in the show notes so people can see your presentation. That'll be great. And then, yeah, anecdotally, my dad told me the other day, he's you always ask for guests. Do they actually come on? Yes, guests do come on. So raise your hand. I will have you on.
Does your dad do marketing?
My dad does not do marketing.
Is he purposeful?
He's certainly purposeful. Let's have him on as a guest. Yeah. Love y'all. Appreciate you. Have a good one. And we'll chat next time.